The day I found out I was pregnant, I cried alone in a pharmacy bathroom. Not because I was unhappy, because I was terrified. I sat there staring at two pink lines while my hands shook so badly I almost dropped the test. My heart raced with 1,000 emotions at once: fear, joy, confusion, hope, and somewhere deep inside me, love. Because for 3 years, Ethan had been my safe place. He was the man who brought me soup when I was sick, the man who held my hand during panic attacks, the man who once told me, no matter what happens, we're a team. I believed him. That was my first mistake. I remember walking home in the rain that afternoon with the pregnancy test hidden inside my purse like it was something fragile and sacred. I imagined his reaction the entire way. Maybe he'd smile. Maybe he'd cry. Maybe he'd hug me and say we'd figure it out together. I wasn't expecting perfection. I was just expecting love. That night, I cooked his favorite dinner. Candles lit the apartment softly while nervous excitement twisted inside my stomach. When Ethan finally walked through the door, he looked exhausted from work. "Hey," he smiled faintly, kissing my forehead. "I have something to tell you." His expression changed immediately. I laughed nervously. "Don't panic, okay?" That sentence alone should have warned me. I handed him the tiny box holding the test. For a second, he just stared at it silently. Then his entire face drained of color. Not emotional, not overwhelmed, cold. "What is this?" he whispered. I forced a shaky smile. "I'm pregnant." The silence after that felt endless. Ethan stepped backward like the words physically hit him. "You're serious?" I nodded slowly, and instead of happiness, I watched panic consume him. He ran both hands through his hair and started pacing the living room. "This can't happen right now." My chest tightened. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, but he barely looked at me. For the next week, something changed between us. He stayed out later, stopped touching me, stopped asking how I felt. The warmth in his voice disappeared almost overnight, replaced with distance I couldn't explain. Whenever I tried talking about the baby, he changed the subject. And then came the moment that shattered everything. One evening, Ethan forgot his phone on the kitchen counter while showering. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I swear I wasn't. But the screen lit up with a message that changed my life forever. "Last night was amazing. Wish you stayed longer. Heart." My stomach dropped instantly. I stared at the name. Rachel, a woman from his office he once told me not to worry about. The room around me blurred, and suddenly every late night, every cold reply, every distant look finally made sense. But what I didn't know then was that discovering the affair was only the beginning of the betrayal. Because Ethan wasn't just hiding another woman, he was hiding the truth about who he really was. I wish I could say I confronted him immediately, but heartbreak doesn't always arrive as anger. Sometimes it arrives as silence. I sat on the couch holding his phone while the shower water ran in the background. My body felt numb, like my mind was trying to protect me from fully understanding what I had just seen. Then another message appeared. "Did she tell you yet?" Rachel again. Ethan replied instantly. "Yeah, everything's complicated now." Complicated. That's what our baby became to him. Not beautiful, not life-changing. Complicated. I felt something inside me crack quietly. When Ethan walked out of the bathroom, he froze the second he saw his phone in my hands. Neither of us spoke at first. "You're cheating on me?" I whispered finally. He closed his eyes slowly, and somehow that hurt more than denial. "I didn't want you finding out like this." I laughed bitterly through tears. How thoughtful. He sat across from me, rubbing his face with both hands. "It just happened," he muttered. Nothing destroys trust faster than hearing betrayal explained casually. "Just happened?" My voice shook. "I'm carrying your child." "I know," but he didn't sound emotional. He sounded trapped. That realization nearly destroyed me. For the next hour, he talked more about his stress than my pain, about timing, responsibility, pressure. Never once did he ask if I was okay. And that's when I truly understood something terrifying. The man I loved was more concerned about losing freedom than losing me. The next morning, Ethan left to clear his head. He didn't come back for 2 days. I barely ate during that time. I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on my stomach while my entire future collapsed around me. Then things became even worse. Rachel messaged me directly. I still remember opening it with trembling fingers. "I didn't know about the pregnancy. I'm sorry." Sorry, that word felt useless now. But then came the sentence that changed everything. He told me you two were basically over months ago. I stopped breathing for a second. Months? Ethan wasn't confused after the pregnancy. He had already been living a double life before I ever showed him that test. And suddenly, every memory became poisoned. Every work meeting, every canceled dinner, every fake smile. The betrayal wasn't sudden, it was carefully hidden. That realization transformed my heartbreak into clarity. I cried for days, yes, but eventually sadness became something sharper, self-respect. I stopped begging for explanations, stopped asking why I wasn't enough. Because cheating rarely comes from the victim lacking value. It comes from the betrayer lacking honesty. When Ethan finally returned home, he looked shocked to see his belongings packed neatly by the door. "You're throwing me out?" I looked him directly in the eyes. "No," I said calmly. "I'm protecting my peace." For the first time since I met him, he looked afraid. After Ethan moved out, I expected him to disappear. Instead, he started panicking. At first, it was endless calls, then long emotional texts, then surprise visits to my apartment. "I made a mistake," he kept saying. But betrayal is never just one mistake. It's hundreds of choices hidden in silence. Meanwhile, Rachel ended things with him completely after learning the truth. Apparently, she felt betrayed too. Strangely, I didn't hate her. We were both lied to by the same man, and now he was alone. For weeks, Ethan kept trying to rebuild what he destroyed, but something inside me had already changed. The woman begging for love was gone. Pregnancy forced me to become stronger faster than I expected. Suddenly, my decisions weren't only about me anymore. I had a tiny life depending on my courage, and that changed everything. A month later, Ethan asked to meet one last time. We sat at a quiet cafe where we once spent entire afternoons laughing together, but now the space between us felt enormous. He looked exhausted. "I miss you," he whispered. I studied his face carefully. Once upon a time, hearing those words would have healed me instantly. Now they only made me sad. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked softly. He lowered his eyes. "You cheated on me after I trusted you with the most vulnerable moment of my life." Tears filled his eyes immediately. "I was scared." "I was scared too," I replied, but I stayed honest. That silence said everything. Then I reached into my purse and handed him an envelope. Inside were copies of legal custody agreements and financial responsibilities prepared by my lawyer. His face changed instantly. "This is serious?" I nodded calmly. "You didn't act like a partner, so now we handle this responsibly." For the first time, Ethan realized love could leave quietly, not dramatically, not loudly, just permanently. Months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and honestly, holding her for the first time healed wounds I thought would stay forever. Ethan sees his daughter occasionally now, but our relationship never recovered. Trust once shattered rarely returns in the same shape. But strangely, I no longer feel anger when I think about him, only gratitude for the lesson, because heartbreak forced me to discover strength I never knew existed. People think betrayal destroys you instantly. Sometimes it does the opposite. Sometimes it introduces you to the strongest version of yourself. The woman who stops begging, stops shrinking, stops confusing love with tolerance. And the biggest lesson I learned through all of it was simple. The right person will never make you feel alone in the moment you need them most.